our second word of the day, because again, they are basically married to each other. You cannot have an action without a slug line, and you can't have a slug line without an action. They happen together every single time you have a new scene in a script. So, action, look at the definition here, guys. Actions in a script are not like when somebody behind the scenes yells, action. That's different. An action in a script is instructions of what the audience is seeing on the screen or on the stage. And it happens every time there's a slug line. There's also then immediately right after the action description. So this is basically, look at the first sentence. The action is basically all of the non-dialogue stuff. Because obviously a lot of scripts are characters saying and doing stuff, but there's a lot of information that needs to go into a script also that isn't just the actor saying and doing stuff. So the action is all of those instructions. What is the audience seeing on the screen? What's all that behind the scenes stuff? So before you do your You Try box, there's a really helpful video that I want you to be carefully watching. This is going to give you a lot of information really quickly, but you guys are very with it kinds of students. And a lot of you are the types of kids who you can hear something once and just do it for forever. So even though a lot of this is going to go over your head, this is all stuff that will help you during this project. So I want you to really carefully pay attention here and carefully watch all of this information about writing actions.
How to describe action in a film script. Hello, and welcome to Video Jug. With any luck, you've watched our films on formatting your page and setting out your scenes. Now it's time for the nitty-gritty, describing what's actually going on screen in a way that will let producers and agents know you mean business. The following film has been prepared with advice from Teach Yourself Screenwriting, part of the Hodder Teach Yourself series. Step 1. Scene direction. The scene direction is the text containing all the non-dialogue descriptions of events and characters' actions that drive the story.
So, let me go back just a tiny bit. Do you see at the top? So we've got the beginning of a scene. They have slug line right here, and after the slug line is a more in-depth description. So sometimes the action is really, really long, and sometimes you only need a little bit of information. And either way is just fine, but it always goes slug line, action, and then you can have the characters saying and doing stuff.
Characters' actions that drive the story. It's also known as business, or the black stuff. For advice on setting it out on the page, watch How to Format a Scene. Your role as the writer is to communicate the characters and storyline to a reader, and not to dictate the nuts and bolts of production. There are, however, a few useful abbreviations you should know.
Watch carefully here.
VO, voiceover, like this. OS, off-screen.
Derek, where are you? Keep your hair on. I'm coming.
MOS, without sound. POV, point of view. FG, foreground. MG, midground. BG, background. Step 2, camera angles. Be very sparing with your use of camera angles and technical directions. It's up to the director to decide what to use, and getting it wrong or overdoing it can make you look amateurish.
But these are the kinds of details that it forces you to think about creative writing in a different way, because you normally don't have to think about stuff like this in just a normal short story. But if it's a story that's getting turned into something, it makes you consider it in a different way.
If you do feel the need to include shot descriptions, keep them basic. LS, long shot.
Watch carefully here.
MS, medium shot. CS, close shot. CU, close up. Tight CU. 2 shot. 3 shot. It's often better to find a substitute to camera directions if you can. Instead of writing long shot of industrial machinery in the distance, try writing something like, in the distance we see industrial machinery. Step 3. Montages and action. A montage is when a series of shots are used to build up a collective picture or feel. They can be written like this. Montage. A Tyrannosaurus Rex roars and runs down the hill. The scientists run into the woods. Screams. A helicopter flies overhead. A large explosion as a bomb is set off. Double spacing is used between the lines, and the shots are designated by ascending alphabetical letters. Step 4. Pace your action. Remember that one script page should be 1 minute of action. So if you think the action will last longer than it looks on the page, spread it out.
Okay, so I'm not going to grade you really tough on this part, but look at this second sentence, guys. This the first time I learned this, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. Over the weekend, I just watched Oppenheimer, which was a 3-hour movie. So according to this, 1 minute of screen time, when you see a movie or a TV show, 1 minute should be 1 page of a script. So if you have a 3-hour movie, or let's say it's a normal size movie, okay? Normal size movies are 1.5 hours. That means it's 90 minutes, which means it's how many pages? 90. So for really long movies or really long stage plays, the scripts are huge. For TV shows, they're a lot shorter. If most TV shows, it's just a 30-minute episode, or really, they're more like 23-minute episodes with commercials and stuff, then yeah, they're much shorter scripts. So, again, I'm not going to grade you on that, but I do find it kind of fascinating that in real Hollywood scripts, that's how it actually works.
Instead of writing, interior, bank,
That's
gay.
the slug
Andy
line.
runs into the bank. He
Here's the
brandishes his
action.
machine gun in the air. Everyone gets down on the floor. He walks over to the cashier. Do it like this. Andy runs into the bank.
Now, this is a really good trick for you, because how many pages am I going to make you write per day? 1. So you are allowed to space out your action like this, guys. If you have a bunch of steps or stuff that you're describing in your action, you are totally allowed to space it out. So a lot of kids don't do that trick, and I'm always like, oh, you're doing way more work than you have to. This is something I would
Brandishes
take
his
advantage of.
machine gun in the air. Everyone gets down on the floor. He walks over to the cashier. By formatting the action like this, you make the important actions clear and make it easier for somebody to read and visualize. Step 5. Sound. If there's a sound that's crucial to the action in the script, then it must be included in capitals within the scene description.
It's kind of
For
like an
example,
onomatopoeia.
A crash echoes through the house.
It's written in capital letters. And that's for the sound
Samantha
department.
hears the sound of a monster.
Because they have to add that
The sound
special
of the
effect.
helicopter fades.
So you're telling those behind-the-scenes
You
people
can
how to
also
do their
use the
job.
term over, bracketed after a sound reference, to imply a sound running over the action in a scene. Don't overdo the use of sound in your script, otherwise every other word in your script will be in capitals. There you have the basics of creating
Okay,
action on
now,
paper.
I know this is a lot, but I'm trying to give you as much information as I can, because then it'll make writing your script really, really easy. So we're going to watch one more video here as part of slugline and action. The first minute of this is actually going to look familiar because I show this during the Studio C script, but we're going to watch more of it. It's going to help you with your You Try box, but it also really will make this project easier. So I know it's been a lot of sitting and listening, but will you do me a favor and still really pay attention? And Lily, let's go ahead and do another round of tickets for everyone who's actually paying attention. Thank you, thank you.
Indie Mogul.
Hey guys, Russell here. This week is all about the basics of screenplay formatting. Next week I'll be covering more advanced formatting tips,
Okay,
but to
we're
know
gonna
what I should
skip ahead
cover,
to
send
where
me
he
your
actually
questions at Friday
starts.
1 Now, let's get to it.
And look at all this stuff, like really, screenplay writing is its own world that most people don't realize how involved it is until you've actually written one yourself.
Interior Fremont City taxi. Night.
Slug
Moving.
line.
Buildings and street scenes go by as seen through a dirty car window.
Action.
William, an older, gruff-looking gentleman who looks like he'd be more comfortable on a Western film set, is in the back seat of a rattling taxi, looking out the window at the passing urban decay. The cabbie has a rough but friendly voice and speaks to William with a nostalgic tone. Cabbie adjusts rearview mirror to see William more easily.
I've been living in this city almost 30 years, you know. Seen it all. My parents, God rest their souls, moved us here so I could be in a good school system. The school system! Can you believe it? To look at this place?
That was a quick excerpt from my short film script I'm currently working on getting made. In that short excerpt are the 5 basic elements of proper screenplay formatting. The slug line, or
Watch
scene
carefully,
heading,
guys.
the action, or description, the character name, the dialogue, and parentheticals, which is a lot of fun to say. The finer points of screenwriting will add more small elements to this mix, but for you beginners, especially those who have never written a properly formatted screenplay before, let's focus on these simple basics. There are many screenplay programs out there that
Okay, we're
help
gonna
make
skip
formatting
this section
easier. That way you
we're
don't have to
using
memorize
Writer
so many.
Duet.
First, the slug line. At the start of each scene, you want to establish a few things. It starts out simple. Is your scene inside or outside, or in this case, interior or exterior? Easy, right? After that, add your location and a description of when the scene takes place. Usually just day or night will suffice, but you can get more specific if you want. Morning, afternoon, evening, dawn, dusk. If the flow of time between two scenes is uninterrupted, even if cutting to a completely different location, you can write continuous. Same location but need to show the passage of time to later in the day, use later. As far as the word moving at the end of the taxi slug line I used earlier, that's generally only used in a moving vehicle. You can also use traveling in that case. And remember,
like if somebody's on a plane in your scene, or somebody's in a car,
that your slug line is all caps all the time. Now for the action, where you write out the description of what is happening on screen, who people are, etc. This is the most straightforward part of the screenplay writing-wise, but there are a few little things to know. First, always write in the present tense. This line later in my script...
Now, I also want to point out, like, a lot of these on your vocab chart here, a lot of these kind of behind-the-scenes people you have to think about. He's doing a good job thinking about some of those, so keep focusing. You're doing so well. I really appreciate it.
William takes out a cigar and nods to the cabbie would never be William will take out the cigar or William took out a cigar. Those just sound silly anyway. The first time a character comes up in the action, generally as they are introduced in the script, their name is capitalized. William, an older, gruff-looking gentleman who looks like he'd be more comfortable on a Western film set, is in the backseat of a rattling taxi. Try to sum things up to describe your character in the action as best you can. You don't want to give their entire life history, just enough to give the reader a feel for who they are. Notice rattling is capitalized also. This can be done to call attention to certain sounds and sound effects. And while there isn't really a definitive rule on when to do this, I think it's best used when it helps set a scene, like the rattling taxi, getting across that the cab is a piece of junk to help set the feel of the scene. Or when it's important to what is happening on screen, which is why sound effects like gunshots and explosions are usually capitalized as well. And one last note about actions and descriptions, always have something between the slug line and the dialogue. Even just one quick line will do. Now we're at the character name. That's easy. All caps, centered, done. If a character is speaking from off screen, but is still physically a part of the scene, you would add OS in parentheses. If a character is not physically part of the scene but is doing a voiceover, you would add VO. Celtex and many other programs make the character name thing easier for you by letting you autofill the name after typing the first letter once you've already put it in. That's a big reason why movies generally don't have characters with the same name and usually have characters whose names start with different letters entirely. Just makes everything easier. For the dialogue, the text gets centered on the page while still keeping a normal left side alignment. Dialogue is also pretty straightforward. Feel free to write it in your character's voice if they've got a specific way of talking, like the cabbie character here, but that's up to you. You can add detail to...
Now, I know there was a really minor swear word, and I apologize. I'm not trying to offend anybody. He's just doing such a good job, so I am so sorry. I did not mean that to be offensive. The thing about the dialogue, did you see any quotation marks? Yes or no, guys? Did you see any quotation marks? No. And that is a huge shift from traditional short story writing and creative writing. In a script, there's no quotation marks at all.
What actions a character is doing while speaking through the use of parentheticals. Set in parentheses and with a left side margin a bit further in to help differentiate it visually from the dialogue, these are used to help block out a scene. They don't have to be complete sentences, just basic descriptions of what is happening. Truth be told, I could probably have moved this note about the mirror to the description, but I wanted to give a good example and found that, as I was reading it, I liked the idea of the character doing this while speaking his lines. So in this short bit, you got all 5 of the basic elements. Properly formatting your screenplays is very important, and the more you do it, the more it'll become second nature.
And really, it'll only take you about 20 minutes before you get really, really comfortable with it. So we're going to do one more little step here. So everybody switch to your tab. Actually, hold on. Let me slow down. If you didn't already give me an example in the You Try box, you could think of any kind of information that you might put in the action. You can think about all of those examples. I put a couple of examples here, but there were like probably 30 more things that you could steal from the videos I just showed you. And then go turn in your action vocab chart. Then I'm going to show you what is probably the most important step in starting your script. So give me a second. I'll let you finish turning in your vocab chart, and then you're going to come back to your script, okay? And I need to get this to reset itself because it's being a little glitchy. So once you start writing, it only takes about a page before you're like, oh, this is super easy. I I got this. No problem at all. But for you guys, yours is going to be in a slightly different spot. Let's see. I always have to remind myself. So I think it's when you click this little keyboard button. But when you guys are on it, let me look at somebody's. I think it's at the top. See how at the top there's a whole toolbar? Let me look at somebody's really quick. So, yeah. So you're going to see a line of little buttons. Like, do you see how underneath File and Edit and Format, underneath that, there's a whole row of buttons. And mine is being glitchy, so it's not showing it, which is super annoying, and I'm really sorry. But those line of buttons, see the one that says, sorry to read over your shoulder, see the one that says Scene? So you're on Writer Duet, and you're looking at the line of buttons. Then next to Scene, it says Action, and then it says Character, and then there's like a parenthesis. So that toolbar is insanely important. I really do need to record this for people who are gone, so give me 1 second. I want to see if I can get it to pull up if I use a different web browser. Fingers crossed. Yeah, okay. So right up here, see where my mouse is wiggling? Yours looks just slightly different, but it's basically the same. So we're going to experiment together. I want everybody to, let's write a fake slug line. The cool thing about this whole program is it's really intuitive. It's going to guess things, and it's going to be like, hey, it looks like you're trying to do this one thing. And then it's going to help you make sure that you format it correctly. So let's start by doing INT, and see how it just guessed? And it was like, hey, are you trying to do a slug line? And then you can just click the one that you want. And then it formats it for you once you press enter. So boom, it just did the first part for me. And then I could write cafeteria. And notice how I don't even have to try and capitalize it. It's doing it for me because, and this is the kicker, guys. Everybody look on my screen. See where my mouse is wiggling? Now that it guessed correctly, see how it has scene that's highlighted? They call it scene, but scene and slugline are the same thing. If it didn't have that highlighted, it would format the whole thing wrong. So you have to pay attention while you're writing. If it had action highlighted, it completely, see how it just changed the capitalization? But if I go back and I click scene or slugline, it changes it for me. Or if I had accidentally clicked like character name, see how it totally changed that formatting? But when I come back and I click the right thing, it fixes it for me. So during the first couple of days of this project, I'll be looking over your shoulder. And if I see that you had the wrong thing, like the wrong button up here clicked, I'll help you get it fixed. But as long as you pay attention for the first little bit, and when you're writing a certain thing, if you actually have the right thing highlighted, then it's going to do the formatting for you. Look, when I did a dash, it guessed for me. It was like, hey, we noticed you're writing your slug line. You probably want one of these things. And then you can just click on the one that you want. You can use your arrow keys to like pick a different one and then just press enter. And boom, it just did my slug line for me. And then look, I pressed enter and it guessed already. It was like, hey, you look like you're probably trying to write an action because slug line and action always happen together. So see how it changed the button and now action is the one that's highlighted? So then let's say like I actually wrote my whole action, right? Blah, 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 blah. And then when I'm done with that, when you press enter, it didn't guess what I wanted. So that's when I have to pay attention. But let's say I was ready to have my actors say and do stuff. So then I would click character. And this is where when you start putting someone's name, it's going to format it for you correctly. So I put the character name and notice how the right thing was highlighted. And now when I press enter, it did guess correctly that I was probably going to write dialogue. So maybe Bob says, yo. But then I also want him to like pick his nose at the same time. So I typed a parenthesis, and in a script, that's when you're giving the actors instructions. So I would just write like picks nose. And notice how it's got parenthetical. That's the thing that's highlighted, which means it's formatting it correctly down here. So pressing enter and paying attention to what's happening up here, this whole program is really intuitive and is going to do all that formatting for you as long as you're actually